Sometimes we forget why we're here. It's easy to fall off track. These help us remember.
These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Growing up, I had a dream, something no one else could see. Tell me what it means when your faith is falling beneath your knees and you can't breathe. Everything you see reminds you of what you're not or something you won't be. You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a business. Not because they wanna do it, just because they heard it pays. And who the fuck wants to be poor knowing that's how we've been raised? Society is getting heavy, I can feel the weight. The pressure of success is like 100 million pounds of shame. And that's the reason I'm staying up late, trying to find a way to escape the stereotypes this day and age is making me feel like the only way I'll be happy is getting signed to a label and making money through rapping. I wanna share my emotion because this world is attacking the very principle of life that lets the people be happy. If you don't have a reason to breathe, why even live? These battle scars are impressions of everything that it is.
Don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Now, if I had a voice that reached 100 million people, I'd tell them there's a reason that we're all created equal. Cause some decide to be great and some decide a sequel to an average person's life is simply what they want to be. So you make your decision, all I know is what I'm given. Won't define the life I lead or the way I dwell in existence. I've seen a greater image on the walls of where I'm living, and the words twisted and scripted remind me of something written. Faith is a gift that is given down to the people. If one believes it, one receives it. It's given if it is needed. Don't ever think you're trapped in a life that you never wanted. Your options are infinite, that's some mathematical logic. I'm not saying I'm a prophet, I'm speaking for what it's worth. These lyrics define my prayers and these battle scars on my church. Not saying I'm a prophet, I'm speaking for what it's worth. These lyrics define my prayers, these battle scars on my church.
Don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Okay, I don't know what happened right there. It went to my outro. Whoops. Now you guys get to see that twice. I don't know what the heck happened there. Something went bonkers with my program. Well, hello everyone. How are you doing? I hope you are doing well. And hello, JJ. This was kind of an impromptu stream, obviously, because I didn't schedule it. And now apparently Restream allows you to just go live. So, excuse me, I drank that Mountain Dew too fast. I figured I would do a quick stream because I will not be around tomorrow night. I will be in the air flying to, the IT team, which is me, definitely needs a consult. I will be flying to South Carolina tomorrow evening. And I think Wayne's home. I hear the birds yelling. And so I figured I would finally get around, because I keep teasing you guys that we're going to go over this little pamphlet, and we haven't done it so far. So I figured we're going to do that. If anyone is looking for the Delaware video I did yesterday, apparently Saturday Night Live got very, very upset at me playing the cowbell skit, and they completely yanked my video. So I had to trim out that part. It takes a while for like YouTube to re-review. So I might just re-upload it without that part, because a lot of people have wanted to watch that video, and it's gone. It's gone until YouTube recognizes that I trimmed out the copyrighted part. And, oh God, you can hear those birds just shrieking. Wayne must be home. Until they figure out that I've trimmed out the copyrighted part. But there's more happening in Delaware. So Will McVeigh submitted to the LNC. We're going to do just a tiny bit of Delaware before we move on to this. Will McVeigh submitted to the LNC his version of events. And boy, he's getting better at perfuming the hog at every retelling. You know, you give him enough time, you can make almost any bullshit sound somewhat palatable. And he's gotten much better at it. And since, you know, we have LNC members who thought it was their responsibility to make sure that they learned absolutely nothing in a month and a half, Richard, like, I'm still agog at that. The first version they're going to hear is the polished turd version. That's why you interview people immediately after the events happen, like I did in New Hampshire. You don't give them time to polish up their stories. So I am having very little faith that the LNC is going to do the right thing in this situation. If they do, it will be because they stumble into it by accident. However, some people I spoke with today have given me a little bit of a different perspective. And I will talk about that a bit more when I go over Will McVeigh's polished turd of a letter. As to a way in which, if the LNC needs to make the decision to disaffiliate, that they can do it down to the right way, rather than just rank disaffiliation. I don't want to talk about that till I actually talk to the legitimate board in Delaware. I mean, really, what a novel concept. Actually ask them what they want to happen. Oh, excuse me, I need to sneeze. Oh, pardon me. Ooh, dust or something. So I'm going to be talking with Amy tomorrow. I really want to know what it is that they want. And as long as it's ethical, which I'm sure it will be, that's what I will advocate. I will advocate what the actual affiliate wants. I know. What a concept, right? What a concept. So I'll be talking to Amy tomorrow because, again, there's a lot of different moving parts here, and I want to know what they want. What do they want? All right. The right to ignore the state. Been talking about doing this. We are finally going to do it. And I might still be streaming over the weekend, but it's so hard to tell when I'm away, when I'm out of town. Again, in South Carolina, be meeting with all kinds of libertarians there. Very, very thrilled about that. So without further ado, we're not going to do all kinds of promos, none of that tonight. Obviously, as usual, super chats are always welcome if that is something you care to do. Not something I'm pushing. What we're going to talk about today is this little pamphlet. I want to just set it up a little bit. I read about this in one of the very early LP news. They were promoting this, and I fell in love with the title because, of course, I love the title, The Right to Ignore the State. And I figured we will go through it. And let me pull it up on the screen for you. Not necessarily going to, this is live, Facebook user. Your name's not coming through because you're not, for some reason the names don't come through on Facebook. It's better to go over to the YouTube channel, Pink Flame of Liberty, and participate there because then everyone can see your comments. It gets really weird on Facebook. So let me pull up my screen here. Well, right there. Here we go. And we're not going to go through this word for word, but at least I don't think so, unless it's that good. I haven't read it yet. This book could suck for all I know. I just know I fell in love with the title, and there's no way something called The Right to Ignore the State can suck. So I've got my copy here. We've got a copy up there on the board. Did I say board? I'm like, okay, class, it's up on the blackboard by Herbert Spencer. But what really fascinated me about this, I examine these things. It is from the Libertarian Classics Library, number 1. You want to know immediately where my mind went. Is there a number 2? Is there a series of these things? Or is it like the typical libertarian project? Somebody does one, and then that's it. They dropped it for 50 cents. And we'll see when this came out, but that might have been actually kind of pricey for a little pamphlet back then, because I think this came out in the late 60s. If I get, oh, nope, I'm wrong. Late 70s. Why did I think? I must have read about this. This must be a reprint, because I read about this in either a 72 or 74 LP News. So this has to be a reprint. So let me see here. Go up. Why am I missing a page here? The right to ignore the state. Did I not scan a page? I must not have scanned a page, because I'm missing. I'm sorry that I'm flipping through here like this. Starts on page 4. Hold on a second here. I'm screwing something up. Window. Let me look at this little sidebar here. Thumbnails. Why isn't it showing the thumbnails? Here we go. Let me make this a little different here for you guys. Okay, here's the page I was looking at before. I don't know why I couldn't pull that up before. So, The Right to Ignore the State by Herbert Spencer and TMC Press 1977. That's why I'm saying I think this is a reprint. So let's go to the next page here. Check out the name. Tanstaffel Multinational Conglomerates. What a name. That had to be a joke. That had to be a joke. Tanstaffel Multinational. That is great. Never heard of them before. I'm going to have to look them up. From Cupertino. Those of you who are who are a member of another cult other than the cult of the Libertarian Party, you all can say what else is in Cupertino. I am very familiar with Cupertino from my other besides Monsanto. I did not know Monsanto was in Cupertino. There's actually something else very famous in Cupertino that I'm very familiar with, because it was the cult I was involved in before the LP. So distributed by the Liberty Bookstore, 811 Castro Street. Somehow that just seems funny to me. Mountain View, California, 94041. Right for wholesale or quantity prices. Copyright 77. Maybe I'm wrong that this isn't a reprint. But just for you guys, I don't want you to keep guessing. Obviously, there's no other of my former cult members here. Apple Corporation, Apple Computers, is in Cupertino. And I used to be, I still am, a complete Apple fangirl. In fact, this is no lie, I don't use this email address anymore. I do own it, though. I own the email address I drank the Kool-Aid at mac.com. I shit you not. And I used to run an Apple fan blog. You could go back to the Wayback Machine and look up the website idrankthekoolaid.com, and you'll see my really, really obsessive Apple fangirl blog. So here's the preface. Okay, this is a reprint. This is a reprint. Okay, it was first published in 1844. I knew it had to be published before. So this is an oldie. Uh-oh. This might be too old. This might be like too old-fashioned for us. Oh, boy. Okay. Herbert Spencer's The Right to Ignore the State was one of his most provocative essays, first published in 1844 in England. Okay. And then it was in Italian as, I will never pronounce that, Diritto di I'm so friggin' gringo here. Diritto di ignorare lo Stato. It has not been previously published in English as a separate essay. Okay. This essay is a logical, deadly analysis of the right of the individual to withdraw from the state. All right. Religious freedom. And it keeps on going here. Okay. It's one of the gems of 19th century libertarian literature. Anthony C. Sutton. All right, well, we're going to go through some of this. Again, we're probably not going to go through it all tonight, even though it's a short little essay. It's only 14 pages. But these older libertarian works are dense. I don't mean dense as in stupid. I mean dense as in so tightly packed with information that you cannot possibly go through it all. So this will be part 1. So here we go. The first title, The Right to Voluntary Outlawry. The word outlawry, that's not a word you hear very often, is it? I think we should be using that word more often. Well, let's go through it. We'll start reading it aloud. I would love to hear your thoughts, and we'll see if there's anything we want to add here. As a corollary, I fucked it up again. Oh, God, I'm cussing way too much. This is definitely getting demonetized. As a corollary to the proposition that all institutions must be subordinated to the law of equal freedom, we cannot choose but admit the right of the citizen to adopt a condition of voluntary outlawry. I do not disagree. If every man has freedom to do all that he wills, provided he infringes not the equal freedom of any other man, then he is free to drop connection with the state, to relinquish its protection, and to refuse paying towards its support. It is self-evident that in so behaving, he in no way trenches upon the liberty of others. We don't use that word trenches that way either anymore. This is such old-fashioned language. For his position is a passive one, and whilst passive, he cannot become an aggressor. Is that true? Is it true that you cannot be an aggressor while passive? Now, I agree in this context, but I don't think that's true in every context. If you're passive the entire time of an action, I agree. It's not possible to be an aggressor while passive. But if you become passive in the midst of an activity, I certainly think you can become an aggressor. For instance, if you shove somebody who can't swim into a pond and then you passively watch them drown, I think you are an aggressor. It is equally self-evident that he cannot be compelled to continue one of a political corporation without a breach of the moral law, seeing that citizenship involves payment of taxes, and the taking away of a man's property against his will is an infringement of his rights. Government, being simply an agent employed in common by a number of individuals to secure to them certain advantages, the very nature of the connection implies that it is for each to say whether he will employ such an agent or not. Definitely, that is in fact the case. If any one of them determines to ignore this mutual safety confederation, nothing can be said except that he loses all claim to its good offices and exposes himself to the danger of maltreatment, a thing he is quite at liberty to do if he likes. He cannot be coerced into political combination without a breach of the law of equal freedom. He can withdraw from it without committing any such breach, and he therefore has a right to so withdraw. Okay, I think that is pretty... I'm going to scroll it now. I'm sorry, Michael. Right there. I'm so sorry I hadn't been doing that. I think that is pretty non-controversially true. Where the controversy comes in is where he says here, it said, obviously, someone can expose themselves to the danger of maltreatment. Of course, today's state thinks that you don't even have the right to expose yourself to the danger of maltreatment because daddy state has to protect you. But that isn't really the controversial part, I think, of this. And again, I haven't read this booklet yet. This may be dealt with later on. I'm anticipating objections, and I'm telling you my objection. What about exerting your right to defend yourself against the danger of maltreatment? So I believe you not only have the right to ignore the state, you have the right to compete with the state. You have the right to supplant the state, at least when it comes to the protection of your own rights. Now, this doesn't say you can't do that. I'm just bringing up the first objection that comes to my mind. I think everything written here is pretty non-controversial. However, who wants to be exposed without any kind of recourse against maltreatment. The reason most of us submit to the state right now is because they have a protection racket. All right. The immorality of the state. Okay. No human laws are of any validity if contrary to the law of nature, and such of them as are valid derive all their force and all their authority mediately. Have you ever seen that word used that way? All their authority mediately or immediately. I don't understand what that word means in this context. I guess it means mediated through it. That's the way I would understand it. So that human laws that are valid get their validity mediated through, so indirectly through the law of nature, or immediately, not indirectly. That's the way I am understanding that word. It is an interesting old word. As you all know, that eventually in the future I'm wanting to do a language show. So I'm always very interested in how language changes. But that is not a way we use that word today. But just guessing by the way we use the word mediate, I would have to say that I think I'm interpreting it. I think I'm, yes, that's the way I would interpret it, Michael. I would, if I were to word this in modern English, it would be all of their authority directly or indirectly from this original. That's the way I would word it, I think, in modern English. All right, we'll see if I'm correct. Thus writes Blackstone. For those of you who don't know, oh, it says down at the bottom here. Let's look at this little asterisk. I happen to know Blackstone because I'm a paralegal, and that's just a very common name in jurisprudence. So it says here, Sir William Blackstone, 1723 through 1780, was the most renowned of English jurists. A lot of today's common law still gets a lot of authority from the books written by Sir Blackstone. To whom let all honor be given, and look, they spell honor the way I do, so you could tell this was written in Britain, be given for having so far outseen the ideas of his time, and indeed we may say of our time. A good antidote this. I just love the way this is worded. It is so old-fashioned-y. A good antidote this for those political superstitions which so wildly prevail. A good check upon that sentiment of power worship, which still misleads us by magnifying the prerogatives of constitutional governments, as it once did those of monarchs. Let men learn that a legislature is not our God upon earth, though by the authority they ascribe to it, and the things they expect from it, they would seem to think it is. Let them learn, rather, that it is an institution serving a purely temporary purpose, whose power, when not stolen, is at the best borrowed. What a fantastic sentence. Oh my goodness. That last sentence is so profound and well written. Now remember, this book was originally written in 1844. We look back at that time and think how frickin' free those people were. And they, even then, the human spirit, was rebelling and chafing against the bonds of the state. This guy would probably, his head would explode if he lived in today's world. But I love that sentence. Let's just do some word, make it more complete out of context. The state is an institution serving a purely temporary purpose whose power, when not stolen, is at best borrowed. Wow. That is fantastic. I love it. All right, let's continue. I wasn't going to read this word for word, but I'm enjoying the language. Nay, indeed, have we not seen that government is essentially immoral? Yes, indeed, we have seen that. Is it not the offspring of evil, bearing about it all the marks of its parentage? People knew how to speak back then. That's all I can say. This is just so poetic. Does it not exist because crime exists? Is it not strong, or as we say, despotic, when crime is great? Is there not more liberty, that is, less government as crime diminishes? And must not government cease when crime ceases, for very lack of objects on which to perform its function? Not only does magisterial power exist because of evil, but it exists by evil. Woo! Whew! That is so true. Violence is employed to maintain it, and all violence involves criminality. Soldiers, policemen, what the hell is this next word? And somebody tell me what this word is right here. Oh, I'm not able to highlight it. This Gaoliers, what is a Gaolier? Soldiers, policemen, and Gaolier. Somebody look that up, please. What's a Gaolier? I think I should know that. Swords and batons and fetters are instruments for inflicting pain, and all infliction of pain is in the abstract wrong. I think some fetishists would disagree with the author here. Sorry to get all, it's a jailer. Interesting. Thank you. I wouldn't say all. I disagree with the sentence even when we're not talking about sexual fetishes. Is all infliction of pain in the abstract? Well, it's in the abstract, okay. I guess in the abstract you can say it's wrong. But for instance, if you need some medication, sometimes it has to be delivered to you. We're not talking about vaccines here. Through an injection, which hurts. But that doesn't mean it's wrong. I mean, there's certain things that hurt, particularly medical procedures, but they're not in the abstract wrong. The state employs evil weapons to subjugate evil and is alike contaminated by the objects with which it deals and the means by which it works. Morality cannot recognize it, for morality, being simply a statement of the perfect law, can give no countenance to anything growing out of and living by breaches of that law. Wherefore, legislative authority can never be ethical, must always be conventional merely. I'm not sure I agree with that either. It depends on what he means by legislative authority. I mean, the prohibition of murder, that's ethical, isn't it? And that can be legislated, certainly. I'm not so sure I agree with that last sentence. Let me continue to scroll here. I like challenging these things. I'd love to hear some pushback if you guys disagree. Hence, there is a certain inconsistency in the attempt to determine the right position, structure, and conduct, notice the Oxford comma, of a government by appeal to the first principles of rectitude. What does that mean? What does this sentence mean? Okay, let's go through this. Rectitude might have meant something different in 1840. Rectitude right now, doesn't that mean like rectitude is reluctance, silence? Am I correct? Isn't that what rectitude means? There's another word I'm thinking of, like reticence. Isn't reticence derived from the word rectitude? So I don't understand this sentence. Why would you, what the heck are the first principles of rectitude? That sentence makes absolutely no sense to me. And it must be because that word does not mean the same thing today. Because I have no idea what the first principles. You think it's righteousness? Let's look this up. I'm getting very interested. Let's see what rectitude, if we can find like an archaic Let's see. Morally. Oh, okay. I'm wrong then. I did not know what rectitude meant. I just learned a new word. Formal. Morally correct behavior or thinking righteousness. Why did I think that meant something else? Interesting. Okay, I had that word wrong then. I've been using it. I don't think I use this word very often, but I had it wrong. All right, so You can't determine the right position, structure, and conduct of a government by appeal to the first principles of righteousness, I guess is what he is saying. For, as just pointed out, the acts of an institution which is in both nature and origin imperfect cannot be made to square with the perfect law. All that we can do is to ascertain, firstly, in what attitude a legislature must stand to the community to avoid being by its mere existence an embodied wrong. Secondly, in what manner it must be constituted so as to exhibit the least incongruity with the moral law. And thirdly, to what sphere its actions must be limited to prevent it from multiplying those breaches of equity it is set up to prevent. The first condition to be conformed to before a legislature can be established without violating the law of equal freedom is the acknowledgement of the right now under discussion, the right to ignore the state. I would agree with that. We're going to continue right here. This is where we left off. And let's see what the little asterisk says. Check this out. Check out this asterisk. This is a very interesting argument. Hence may be drawn an argument for direct taxation, seeing that only when taxation is direct does repudiation of state burdens become possible. I believe that is true, and that is why we do not see very much direct taxation. The people as the source of power. I think Spike Cohen would like that. You are the power. Upholders of pure despotism may fitly believe state control to be unlimited and unconditional. They who assert that men are made for governments and not governments for men may consistently hold that no one can remove himself beyond the pale of political organization. But they who maintain that the people are the only legitimate source of power, that legislative authority is not original but deputed, that's another great word, cannot deny the right to ignore the state without entangling themselves in an absurdity. For, if legislative authority is deputed, it follows that those from whom it proceeds are the masters of those on whom it is conferred. True. It follows further that as masters they confer the said authority voluntarily, and this implies that they may give or withhold it as they please. To call that deputed which is wrenched from men whether they will or not is nonsense. But what is here true of all collectively is equally true of each separately. As a government can rightly act for the people only when empowered by them, so also can it rightly act for the individual only when empowered by him. This is an argument I make all the time. Of course, not quite so hoity-toity as this, but I make this argument a great deal of time when I'm talking with constitutionalists. As a lot of you know, and some people consider this heresy, I do not, hello, Julian, I do not fetishize the Constitution. I actually am a much bigger fan of the Declaration of Independence because it does declare, like Scarlett O'Hara, I do declare, it does declare that government can only exist through the consent of the governed. I do not believe in collective rights. Therefore, an automatic defeater is I do not consent. That is why I wear a button around town all the time that says I do not consent. It's a great conversation starter. Most people, when they see that, they're puzzled. They don't know what it's about. They do not expect me to launch into a discussion of the Declaration of Independence with my I do not consent button. I don't think I have one here. No, I just have the big government sucks button here. I don't have my I do not consent one here. It's right next to my abolish the TSA button that I wear when I go through the airport as well. That's always a hit. Alrighty, let's continue here. We're at the A, B, and C thing. If A, B, and C debate whether they shall employ an agent to perform for them a certain service, and if whilst A and B agree to do so, C dissents. C cannot equitably be made a party to the agreement in spite of himself. Under democracy, he can. And that's why democracy sucks. And this must be equally true of 30 as of 3. And if of 30, why not 300 or 3,000 or 3 millions? Amen. Preach it, brother. Maybe we are going to get through this whole thing, because I'm enjoying this. But I'm still waiting to hear the argument about competing with government rather than just ignoring the government. Because in that example, say we had A, B, C, D, and E, and A, B, and C all wanted one thing and D and E wanted the other, why couldn't they both have their way? As long as they weren't infringing upon the equal liberty of others. Right? Right. All right. Subordination of government authority. Of the political superstitions lately alluded to, none is so universally diffused as the notion that majorities are omnipotent. Mic drop, right? And let me add something here, because I am going to be, listen, you guys, whether you give me permission to or not, I reserve the right to myself to be very, very, very salty for the month of November. So make sure that you're not on a low sodium diet when you come. Listen to me, because I am going to be very, very salty. And I'm warning you right now. Okay, so let's read that sentence again. The notion that majorities are omnipotent, or the notion that 2/3 of an LNC is omnipotent either. Yes, I'm being a salty bitch. Under the impression that the preservation of order will ever require power to be wielded by some party, the moral sense of our time feels that such power cannot rightly be conferred on any but the largest. What the heck is a moiety? You see that word right there? Help me out. What's a moiety? You see? Oh, hold on. Where is it at here? Yeah, right here. In the 1, 2, 3, 4. In the 5th sentence there. What's a moiety? Let's look that up, because now I'm just really confused. I think I looked this up before when I was reading Radicals for Capitalism. Moiety. As I'm getting old, I'm forgetting words. Moiety. Each of two parts into which a thing is or can be divided. Aha. I'm going to have to relate that to Roberts. Instead of saying division, Mike, let's say moiety. Remind me we're going to need to do that, Mike. I think that would be quite humorous. Moiety. Okay, got it. So where were we at here? But the largest moiety of society. Aha. So what this sentence is saying is basically the moral sense of modern governmental theory is that the largest division is where power lies. It interprets literally the saying that the voice of the people is the voice of God, and transferring to the one the sacredness attached to the other. It concludes from that the will of the people, that is, of the majority, or the moiety, there can be no appeal. Yet is this belief entirely erroneous? That is a very weird last sentence. It sounds like it needs a question mark at the end, doesn't it? This is like such old-fashioned wording. Suppose, for the sake of argument, that, struck by some Malthusian panic, a legislature duly representing public opinion were to enact that all children born during the next 10 years should be drowned. Does anyone think such an enactment would be warrantable? If not, there's evidently a limit to the power of a majority. Yes, there is. Let's make sure I'm scrolled down here. Suppose again that of two races living together, Celts and Saxons, for example, the most numerous determined to make the others their slaves, would the authority of the greatest number be in such a case valid? If not, there is something to which its authority must be subordinate. Suppose once more that all men having incomes under £50 a year were to resolve upon reducing every income above that amount to their own standard and appropriating the excess for public purposes. Could their resolution be justified? A lot of people today would say it would be. If not, it must be a third time confessed that there is a law to which the popular voice must defer. What then is that law, if not the law of pure equity, the law of equal freedom? These restraints, which all would put to the will of the majority, are exactly the restraints set up by that law. We deny the right of a majority to murder, to enslave, or to rob, simply because murder, enslaving, and robbery are violations of that law, violations too gross to be overlooked. But if great violations of it are wrong, so are smaller ones. If the will of the many cannot supersede the first principle of morality in these cases, neither can it in any. So that however insignificant the minority, and however trifling the proposed trespass against their rights, no such trespass is permissible. I was telling the Castle Rock Town Council that just the other day, because they're like, but it's only 0.01% increase. Oh, my Lord, have mercy. When we have made our Constitution purely democratic, thinks to himself the earnest reformer, we shall have brought government into harmony with absolute justice. Such a faith, though perhaps needful for the age, is a very erroneous one. By no process can coercion be made equitable. The freest form of government is only the least objectionable form. And the least objectionable form is none at all. Oh, scroll down, sorry. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me, because I have my own little copy in front of me. The rule of the many by the few we call tyranny. The rule of the few by the many is tyranny also, only of a less intense kind. You shall do as we will and not as you will, is in either case the declaration, and if the 100 make it to the 99 instead of the 99 to the 100, it is only a fraction less immoral. Is it, though? I disagree with this statement. I think they're equally immoral. Is morality judged by the number of people that are wronged? I don't believe it is. I don't believe that you can put rights violations on a scale like that. I think it is just as wrong for the 99 to dictate to the 1 as it is for the 1 to dictate to the 99, if we're going to be true individualists. Of two such parties, whichever fulfills this declaration necessarily breaks the law of equal freedom, the only difference being that by the one it is broken in the persons of 99, whilst by the other it is broken in the persons of 100. And I gotta sneeze again. Excuse me. There's like dust got really kicked up down here. Yeah, so I absolutely disagree with this paragraph. They're both equally wrong. And the merit of the democratic form of government consists solely in this, that it trespasses against the smallest number. I don't think... Okay, I'm going to say where I do agree, though, maybe. If you have to choose between two evil choices, perhaps you can make the argument that it is merit that it trespasses against the smallest number. But I don't think you can make the argument that it's more moral. That they're both equally immoral. I think you start getting into the trolley problem here, don't you? Isn't this just a different way of articulating the trolley problem? Like, if you have to flip the switch, you obviously want to kill the least amount of people, but you're still killing people. I don't think it's like, I don't think you can judge the value, the moral value by that. The very existence of majorities and minorities is indicative of an immoral state. The man whose character harmonizes with the moral law we found to be one who can obtain complete happiness without diminishing the happiness of his fellows. But the enactment of public arrangements by vote implies a society consisting of men otherwise constituted, implies that the desires of some cannot be satisfied without sacrificing the desires of others, implies that in the pursuit of their happiness, the majority inflict a certain amount of unhappiness on the minority, implies, therefore, organic immorality. Thus, from another point of view, we again perceive that even in its most equitable form, it is impossible for government to disassociate itself from evil. And further, that unless the right to ignore the state is recognized, its acts must be essentially criminal. That's not a complete thought, though. Without the right to compete. Because let's say we all here, which we do, of course, but let's just say in this hypothetical world we're talking about here, everyone recognizes the right to ignore the state. But if you do not recognize the right to take upon yourself the functions that the state was allegedly performing for you in the performance of rights protection, it's because it won't let you compete. Even though the right to ignore the state is recognized, its acts are still essentially criminal. I hope that made sense. Because I'm like thinking through this. Because again, this is the first time I read through this. Right, the limits of taxation. I don't like that title already. I don't like that title. Limits implies there's some that's acceptable. That a man is free to abandon the benefits and throw off the burdens of citizenship may indeed be inferred from the admissions of existing authorities and of current opinion, as long as they are free to take upon themselves the benefits of their own protection. You see, I'm having a real problem with some of this. I mean, I like this pamphlet so far as it goes, but I don't think it goes far enough. Unprepared as they probably are for so extreme a doctrine as the one here maintained, the radicals of our day yet unwittingly profess their belief in a maxim which obviously embodies this doctrine. Do we not continually hear them quote Blackstone's assertion that no subject of England can be constrained to pay any aids or taxes, even for the defense of the realm or the support of government, but such as are imposed by his own consent or that of his representative in Parliament? And what does this mean? We are going to the next page. Hold on, I'm sorry. It means, say they, that every man should have a vote. True, but it means much more. If there is any sense in words, it is a distinct enunciation of the very right now contended for, in affirming that every man may not be taxed unless he has directly or indirectly given his consent. It affirms that he may refuse to be so taxed, and to refuse to be taxed is to cut all connection with the state. Perhaps it will be said that this consent is not a specific but a general one, and that the citizen is understood to have assented to the very thing his representative may do when he voted for him. But suppose he did not vote for him, and on the contrary, did all in his power to get elected someone holding opposite views. What then? Yeah, what then indeed? The reply will probably be that by taking part in Man, these arguments do not change, do they? That by taking part in such an election, he tacitly agreed to abide by the decision of the majority. Kiss my libertarian ass. No, I did not. And how if he did not vote at all? Why then he cannot justly complain of any tax, seeing that he made no protest against its imposition. So curiously enough, it seems that he gave his consent in whatever way he acted, whether he said yes, whether he said no, or whether he remained neuter. That is a really good point, isn't it? A rather awkward doctrine, this. I love that wording. Here stands an unfortunate citizen who is asked if he will pay money for a certain proffered advantage, and whether he employs the only means of expressing his refusal or does not employ it. We are told he practically agrees, if only the number of others who agree is greater than the number of those who dissent. And thus we are introduced to the novel principle that A's consent to a thing is not determined by what A says, but by what B may happen to say. That is very good. That is very, very good. It is for those who quote Blackstone to choose between this absurdity and the doctrine above set forth. Either his maxim implies the right to ignore the state, or it is sheer nonsense. Then, on civil and religious liberty. Since this was written in 1844 originally, I have a feeling it's going to be much more religious than we would be comfortable being today. I am a religious person, but I recognize that religion is not necessary to believe in liberty, and I am probably in the minority in this group. All right. There is a strange heterogeneity in our political faiths. Political faiths? I don't have a political faith. Systems that have had their day and are beginning here and there to let the daylight through are patched with modern notions utterly unlike in quality and color, and men gravely display these systems, wear them, and walk about in them, quite unconscious of their grotesqueness. This transition state of ours, partaking as it does equally of the past and the future, breeds hybrid theories, exhibiting the oddest union of bygone despotism and coming freedom. Here are types of the old organization, curiously disguised by germs of the new, peculiarities showing adaptation to preceding state modified by rudiments that prophesy of something to come, making altogether so chaotic a mixture of relationships that there is no saying to what class these bursts of the age should be referred. What a complex sentence. But I get it. I get what they're saying. Is that we're kind of just cobbling together old and new things and living in a state of cognitive dissonance. I just said everything he just said in that run-on sentence in about 1/10 of many words. As ideas must of necessity bear the stamp of the time, it is useless to lament the contentment with which these incongruous beliefs are held. Otherwise it would seem unfortunate that men do not pursue to the end the trains of reasoning which have led to these partial modifications. In the present case, for example, consistency would force them to admit that, on other points besides the one just noticed, they hold opinions and use arguments in which the right to ignore the state is involved. For what is the meaning of dissent? The time was when a man's faith and his mode of worship were as much determinable by law as his secular acts, and according to provisions extant in our statute book are so still. Thanks to the growth of a Protestant spirit, however, we have ignored the state in this matter, wholly in theory and partly in practice. And that is a good point for those back then. It used to be, that religion was state mandated. It was not a private thing. It was state mandated. And then the Protestants came in and just basically said, F you. And then, of course, the formerly oppressed becomes the oppressor, and then Protestantism became mandated by the state, when it was Catholicism before. By assuming an attitude which, if consistently maintained, implies a right to ignore the state entirely. Observe the positions of the two parties. This is your creed, says the legislature. You must believe and openly profess what is here set down for you. I shall not do anything of the kind, answered the nonconformist. I will go to prison rather. Your religious ordinances, pursues the legislature, shall be such as we have prescribed. You shall attend the churches we have endowed, and adopt the ceremonies used in them. Nothing shall induce me to do so, is the reply. I altogether deny your power to dictate to me in such matters, and mean to resist to the uttermost. Lastly, adds the legislature, we shall require you to pay such sums of money toward the support of these religious institutions as we may see fit to ask. Not a farthing will you have from me, exclaims our sturdy independent. Even did I believe in the doctrines of your church, which I do not, I should still rebel against your interference, and if you take my property, it shall be by force and under protest. What now does this proceeding amount to when regarded in the abstract? It amounts to an assertion by the individual of the right to exercise one of his faculties, the religious sentiment, without let or hindrance, and with no limit save that set up by the equal claims of others. And what is meant by ignoring the state? Simply an assertion of the right similarly to exercise all the faculties. This one is just an expansion of the other, rests on the same footing with the other, must stand or fall with the other. Men do indeed speak of civil and religious liberty as different things, but the distinction is quite arbitrary. They are parts of the same whole and cannot philosophically be separated. I agree with that. Now, I've argued this quite a bit. As a religious person myself, I do not believe in the quote-unquote doctrine of freedom of religion. I think it is absolutely absurd. I think it is absolutely discriminatory against the non-believer. Freedom of religion is merely freedom of conscience, and all men have that, whether they believe in a deity or not. I cannot stand these freedom of religion arguments. If there's a certain freedom that I have merely because I'm religious, you, the atheist, have that same freedom as well. Continuing. Yes, they can, interposes an objector. Assertion of the one is imperative as being a religious duty. The liberty to worship God in the way that seems to him right is a liberty without which a man cannot fulfill what he believes to be divine commands, and therefore conscience requires him to maintain it. True enough. But how if the same can be asserted of all other liberty? How if maintenance of this also turns out to be a matter of conscience? This guy's making the same argument I just did. I hadn't read ahead, but I piss off a lot of religious people with what I say, but man, the whole freedom of religion thing just pisses me off because it's so discriminatory and religious people do not see that. Have we not seen that human happiness is the divine will, that only by exercising our faculties is this happiness obtainable, and that it is impossible to exercise them without freedom? And if this freedom for the exercise of faculties is a condition without which the divine will cannot be fulfilled, the preservation of it is, by our objector's own showing, a duty. Or in other words, it appears not only that the maintenance of liberty of action may be a point of conscience, but that it ought to be one. And thus we are clearly shown that the claims to ignore the state in religious and in secular matters are in essence identical. Abso-fucking-lutely. They are absolutely identical. And religious people need to learn that. Let me have some soda here. I'm going to have to sneeze again. Give me 1 second. Whew. The other reason commonly assigned for nonconformity admits of similar treatment. Besides resisting state dictation in the abstract, the dissenter resists it from disapprobation of the doctrines taught. No legislative injunction will make him adopt what he considers an erroneous belief, and bearing in mind his duty toward his fellow men, he refuses to help through the medium of his purse in disseminating this erroneous belief. The position is perfectly intelligible, but it is one which either commits its adherents to civil nonconformity also, or leaves them in a dilemma. For why do they refuse to be instrumental in spreading error? Because error is adverse to human happiness. And on what ground is any piece of secular legislation disapproved? For the same reason, because thought adverse to human happiness. How then can it be shown that the state ought to be resisted in the one case, meaning the religious, and not in the other, meaning the secular? I added the religious and secular there because, this thing is so wordy, you might have forgotten what the point was. Will anyone deliberately assert that if a government demands money from us to aid in teaching what we think will produce evil, we ought to refuse it? But if that money is for the purpose of doing what we think will produce evil, we ought not to refuse it? Yet such is the hopeful proposition which those have to maintain who recognize the right to ignore the state in religious matters but deny it in civil matters. Excellent. Most excellent. All right, I think we are on the last few pages here. I thought I said it was only 11 pages. Maybe I'm wrong. We're going to go through it's 14 pages. We're going to go through the whole thing, though, because I'm enjoying this. And those of you who might be bored or think it's a little too long, you can stop and come back to it later. But there's no point in stopping a few pages out. I hope you guys are enjoying this 1844 work as well. Progress hindered by a lack of social morality. The substance of the essay once more reminds us of the incongruity between a perfect law and an imperfect state. The practicability of the principle here laid down varies directly as social morality. In a thoroughly he's going to diss on anarchy here. Bad book but never mind. That's okay. I'm used to being dissed on. The practicability of the principle here laid down varies directly as social morality. I said that already. In a thoroughly vicious community, its admission would be productive of anarchy. Ah, my sweet summer child, you've learned so much in this book, but do not yet really grasp what actual freedom is. In a completely virtuous one, its admission... Oh, I see what he's saying. Never mind. I got all triggered for no reason. I think. Maybe. Never mind. No, I didn't. I got triggered properly. Never mind. Never mind. Never mind. I was right to be upset. In a completely virtuous one, its admission will be both innocuous and inevitable. Progress toward a condition of social health, a condition that is, in which the remedial measures of legislation will no longer be needed, is progress toward a condition in which those remedial measures will be cast aside and the authority prescribing them disregarded. Mike, what he basically was saying is if men are vicious, anarchy will result, and if men are virtuous, having no government will be innocuous. And I just thoroughly object to his conflation of viciousness with anarchy. The two changes are of necessity coordinate. That moral sense whose supremacy will make society harmonious and government unnecessary is the same moral sense which will then make each man assert his freedom even to the extent of ignoring the state, is the same moral sense which, by deterring the majority from coercing the minority, will eventually render government impossible, which that is anarchy, my dude. That is anarchy. And as what are merely different manifestations of the same sentiment must bear a constant ratio to each other, the tendency to repudiate governments will increase only at the same rate that governments become needless. I disagree with him here. And because we, 10 pages, divided his argument that he's making here, he's saying that government will become needless when crime becomes eradicated. I don't think crime will ever become eradicated. And he's talking about the state here, so not just governance. If we are waiting for there to be no crime, for there to be no state, we will be waiting forever. We just need to have rights enforcement that is not enforced through a territorial monopoly. This author has not yet progressed to that. He's halfway there. He's not all the way there. Let not any be alarmed, therefore, at the promulgation of the foregoing doctrine. There are many changes yet to be passed through before it can begin to exercise much influence. Probably a long time will elapse before the right to ignore the state will be generally admitted, even in theory. It will be still longer before it receives legislative recognition, because he thinks you have to get rid of crime first. Now, I don't think he does, Mike. If you go back, you came in late to this party. Go to the very beginning of this and you'll see he doesn't. That's why I said 10 pages just separated his argument here. And I think he forgot what his argument was by the time he got to page 11 here, because this doesn't make any sense. And then there will be plenty of checks upon the premature exercise of it. So he's here warning against the danger. He's arguing here for the liberty and the right to ignore the state, at the same time assuring people who might be scared of this that this is just a theoretical discussion, because until all men are virtuous and crime is eliminated, this won't happen. Okay, my dude, I don't agree with you there. I loved your reasoning, but this part here seems to be taking away with one hand what you gave with the other. A sharp experience will sufficiently instruct those who may too soon abandon legal protection. You see, Mike, he just made my point right here. He does not grant the right to your own rights protection. So what he's saying here is, don't worry about too many people exercising their right to ignore the state, because there will be plenty of checks on doing this prematurely, because a sharp experience will sufficiently instruct those who may too soon abandon legal protection. He is assuming here that the only way you have legal protection is through the state. Okay. Great little booklet, fatally flawed. Whilst in the majority of men, There is such a love of tried arrangements and so great a dread of experiments that they will probably not act upon this right until long after it is safe to do so. So you must submit to a criminal organization of the state because it's unsafe not to. Oh my word. Now I'm getting mad at this book. A lot of this is great, but that part was pure twaddle. But let's see. Let's go. I'm sorry I hadn't been scrolling because I'd been getting angry. But here's a hopeful chapter. The coming decay of the state. It is a mistake to assume. But what I do like about this book, though, is that it's written in 1844, and he recognized actually, do I like this or I don't like this? No, I guess I don't like it, but I like it as an example to show that government and state have for a very long time been conflated when they don't really have to be. But that when he says government here, he means the state. It is a mistake to assume that government must necessarily last forever. The institution marks a certain stage of civilization. It is natural to a particular phase of human development. Now, I agree with him here. I think we are on the cusp of the next stage of human political evolution. I think democracy was one such development, and it is in its twilight. It is not essential, but incidental. Uh-oh. Mike, are you triggered as much by that word incidental as I am? Because all I can think of is those goddamn motions. As amongst the Bushmen, oh my God, that probably is considered very racist today. We find a state antecedent to government, so may there be one in which it shall become extinct. Already has it lost something of its importance. There was a time... The time was, when the history of a people was but the history of its government. It is otherwise now. The once universal despotism was but a manifestation of the extreme necessity of restraint. Okay, that is true. Feudalism, serfdom, slavery, all tyrannical institutions are merely the most vigorous kinds of rule, springing out of and necessary to a bad state of man. See? He's making that point again. I don't agree. The progress from these cases is the same. Less government. Constitutional forms mean this. Political freedom means this. Democracy means this. And he contradicted himself here. He's saying amongst more primitive people, there was less government. I'm not really following. It seems like he's saying in more primitive people, they didn't have as much government, but then as civilization progressed, then we got more government, but as history progresses, we're getting less. I don't know. This argument's not making any sense to me. Maybe I'm misunderstanding it. In societies, associations, joint stock companies, we have new agencies occupying big fields, filled in less advanced times and countries by the state. With us, the legislature is dwarfed by newer and greater powers, is no longer master but slave. Do you think this legislature is slave? I think the legislature is master right now. That could be what he means, Mike. Pressure from without has come to be acknowledged as the ultimate ruler. Allegedly, it's not true. What is the Anti-Corn Law League? The triumph of the Anti-Corn Law League. I don't know what that is, but let's just move on. Whatever it is, it was something that existed. Is simply the most marked instance yet of the new style of government, that of opinion, overcoming the old style, that of force. Oh, my sweet summer child. Opinion and force now have merged. It bids fair to become a trite remark that the lawmaker is but the servant of the thinker. He was... If only he could see what has happened today. Daily is statecraft held in less repute. Even the times can see that. The social changes thickening around us establish a truth sufficiently humiliating to legislative bodies, and that the great stages of our progress are determined rather by the spontaneous workings of a society, connected as they are with the progress of art and science. Lost my spot here. Where am I at? The operations of nature and other such unpolitical causes, than by the proposition of a bill, the passing of an act, or any other event of politics or of state. Thus, as civilization advances, does government decay. I don't know if that's true. Decay as in getting worse, but I think he means decay as in lessons. To the bad, it is essential, to the good not. It is the check which national wickedness makes to itself, exists only to the same degree. Its continuance is proof of still existing barbarism. See, he's making that point again, Mike, that you can't get rid of the state until you get rid of crime. What a cage is to the wild beast, law is to the selfish man. Restraint is for the savage, the rapacious, the violent, not for the just, the gentle, the benevolent. All necessity for external force implies a morbid state. Dungeons for the felon, a straitjacket for the maniac, crutches for the lame, stays for the weak-backed. For the infirm of purpose, a master, for the foolish, a guide, but for the sound mind in a sound body, none of these. Were there no thieves and murderers, prisons would be unnecessary. It is only because tyranny is yet rife in the world that we have armies. Barristers, judges, juries, all the instruments of the law exist simply because knavery exists. Magisterial force is the consequence of social vice, and the policeman is but the complement of the criminal. Therefore, it is that we call government a necessary evil. Totally disagree with everything he said here. So I think I was interpreting him properly earlier, Mike. What then must be thought of a morality which chooses this probationary institution for its basis, builds a vast fabric of conclusions upon its assumed permanence, selects acts of parliament for its materials, and employs the statesman for its architect? The expedience philosophy does this. It takes government into partnership, assigns to it the entire control of its affairs, enjoins all to defer to its judgment, makes it, in short, the vital principle, the very soul of its system. When Paley teaches that the interest of the whole society is binding upon every part of it, kiss my libertarian ass, he implies the existence of some supreme power by which that the interest of the whole society is to be determined. And elsewhere, he more explicitly tells us that for the attainment of a national advantage, the private will of the subject is to give way. Boy, are we hearing this today when it comes to the whole pandemic thing, right? And that the proof of this advantage lies with the legislature. Still more decisive is Bentham when he says, the happiness of the individuals of whom a community is composed, that is, their pleasures and their security, is the sole end which the legislature ought to have in view, the sole standard and conformity with which each individual ought, as far as depends upon the legislature, to be made to fashion his behavior. These positions, be it remembered, are not voluntarily assumed. They are necessitated by the premises. If, as the propounder tells us, expediency means the benefit of the mass, not of the individual, of the future as much as of the present, it presupposes someone to judge of what will most conduce to that benefit. Upon the utility of this or that measure, the views are so various as to render an umpire essential. Whether productive duties or established religions or capital punishments or poor laws do or do not minister to the general good are questions concerning which there is such difference of opinion that, were nothing to be done till all agreed upon them, we might stand still to the end of time. If each man carried out, independently of a state power, his own notions of what would best secure the greatest happiness of the greatest number, society would quickly lapse into confusion. His problem, oops, I went the wrong direction, right here. Keep going, keep going, keep going. I was going the wrong direction. Right here. His problem is that we should be trying to think of the greatest happiness of the greatest number. I am not a utilitarian. Clearly, therefore, a morality established upon a maxim of which the practical interpretation is questionable involves the existence of some authority whose decision respecting it shall be final, that is, a legislature. And without that authority, such a morality must ever remain inoperative. He seems to be like arguing against himself now. Yeah, Mike, it is icky, isn't it? Let's see if this last paragraph like undoes like all this crap he just wound. See here then the predicament. A system of moral philosophy professes to be a code of correct rules for the control of human beings, fitted for the regulation of the best as well as the worst members of the race, applicable, if true, to the guidance of humanity in its highest conceivable perfection. Government, however, is an institution originating in man's imperfection, an institution confessedly begotten by necessity out of evil, one which might be dispensed with were the world peopled with the unselfish, the conscientious, the philanthropic, one, in short, inconsistent with this same highest conceivable perfection. How then can that be a true system of morality which adopts governments as one of its premises? He made absolutely zero sense at the end there. He didn't tie anything together, but he is making the argument that you can't do away with the state until you do away with all evil, but you still have a right to ignore the state as long as you agree to submit to the predations of evil without being able to compete to defend yourself. So, while he had a lot right in this book, I actually think his ultimate argument is unethical. That's my conclusion. Good points in there. But its overarching point, I could not disagree with more. I'm wondering what you guys think. But that was an interesting little philosophical exercise, I thought at least. Of course, my idea of fun is a libertarian idea of fun, which most people think is quite insane, right? Well, I'm glad I got through that, though. It's going to give me some food for thought. All right, guys, I'm probably going to be up all night because I need to pack. I need to record my radio show for this weekend. I think I haven't really decided on my subject matter, to be honest with you. D. Frank Robinson posted a very cool case in which it was said that restricting the right to personally criticize public servants is a violation of the First Amendment. Now, of course, the Libertarian Party is not a government agency. It is a quasi-government agency in some sense, though. And I would argue, I don't believe that freedom of speech only means that the government can't tell you what to say. I have a much broader, I'm a free speech purist. I think that I might go through that case because I think it's pretty damning to the 11 corrupt members of the LNC. So that might be my subject, but I also wanted to go through ballot censorship. I wanted to go through a little bit of the history of how we ended up adopting the Australian ballot and things such as that. So I haven't decided yet what my show is going to be, but I have to record it this evening. So I don't know. I probably will wait to talk about that free speech case until I have the actual rulings from the Judicial Committee so that I can really not guess at why they unjustly ruled against me. And I'm not reserving judgment on whether it was unjust or not. It was unjust. I just want to know what contortions of pretzels they put themselves through. Judging by the screenshot that D. Frank Robinson shared from Alicia Matson, it seemed like their entire ruling pivoted on the interpretation of whether or not I deserved a trial. That was only one point of my appeal. They could have all agreed that I didn't deserve a trial and still overturned the ruling because there's still the issue of with cause. But it seems to me like they bailed on that issue. I don't know. I need to read the rulings. While I vehemently disagree that I wasn't entitled to a trial. I do understand why some people interpret our bylaws that way. I don't agree, but I understand. And I don't think interpreting bylaws differently makes you a bad person. I do think interpreting the bylaws that way when it doesn't prohibit a trial makes you a bad libertarian. There's a difference between being a bad person and a bad libertarian. For instance, I think our parliamentarian, Richard Brown, is utterly and absolutely fucking wrong in his interpretation of our bylaws. However, he's not a libertarian. And it is reasonable. I understand his interpretation. It doesn't make him a bad person. When I criticized him on D. Frank's post, he seemed to think I was attacking him personally, and I was not. What I said to Richard Brown was, your decision was fucking awful, and you fucking ruined my life, at least for right now, with it. And he got very upset with me and said, whatever, Karen Ann. How dismissive can you be? He said, I won't resort to personal attacks. Richard, I didn't attack you personally. I attacked your opinion. Your opinion sucked. But you're not a bad person. You just had a sucky opinion. I have sucky opinions. You think my opinion sucks on the interpretation of the bylaws, and I don't for a second think that you think that means I'm a bad person. And I can't criticize you for being a bad libertarian because you're not a libertarian. So, none of that was a personal attack. I just think your opinion sucked. And you want to know what? JJ in our private talks, Mike will say, no, that me and Mike had a sharp disagreement with JJ on one of his opinions. I thought his opinion on that particular thing sucked. But that didn't mean JJ was a bad person. It just meant we disagreed. What is it today that you can't say someone's opinion on something sucks without them thinking you ran over their dog? So, when it comes to the JC, I will think their opinion sucks. When it comes to whether or not our bylaws require a trial, they do. However, I do think they are bad libertarians if they came to that conclusion. Because as someone else said, I view our judicial committee much in the way I would view a jury, who have the absolute right and obligation not just to judge the letter of the law, but the justice and morality of it as well. We assert the right of juries to do that, and our judicial committee thinks they don't have the right to do that. We've lost our way as libertarians. So I just disagree with Richard Brown on his parliamentary opinion, but that does not at all reflect on my opinion as him as a person in any sense whatsoever. And not even as a libertarian, because he's not a libertarian. It'd be like somebody, like if I were the parliamentarian for a Republican Party and there was some Republican principle that I didn't agree with. They couldn't accuse me of being a bad Republican. I'm not a Republican at all. I'm not a bad one or a good one. I'm not one at all. And I think that's an advantage, actually, that we have a parliamentarian that's not a libertarian, because he's not part of our factional disputes. But the Judicial Committee, they're libertarians, and I will judge them as libertarians. And somebody who will take the letter, even if it's their honestly believed, honestly held conviction that the letter of our bylaws do not require a trial, but their libertarian conscience did not demand it, I will never, ever, ever vote for them to be in a position of authority over anyone ever again. And that's not personal. It's me protecting fellow libertarians from what happened to me. It's just gross. What happened to me is just gross. And every single architect of that should never be in a position of authority over anyone ever again. It doesn't mean that they shouldn't ever serve even in positions of elected positions, like, say, for instance, platform committee. You don't have any kind of authority really over anyone. You're not going to throw them out of the party or anything like that. There's plenty of things where I'd be fine with them to be on, but not a judicial committee, not the Libertarian National Committee, not the governing board of a state party. And it's bad because a lot of these people I've respected a whole lot. But that's my position. I will never, ever, ever again give a consent through my vote to allow what happened to me to ever, ever happen to another person again, if I can help it. I just can't, no matter how much I might like a person or otherwise respect them. Though the 11 people on the LNC I neither like nor respect. The JC's different. There's a lot of people on there that I like and respect. And reading their decision is going to be tougher than the corrupt LNC. Because, corrupt people are going to behave corruptly. Anyway, we shall be dissecting it, Mike. Yes, we shall. And hopefully it won't be too terrible. I'm more looking forward to D. Frank Robinson's dissent, though he's going off in a weird direction. Have you seen the direction he's going in, Mike? I mean, I'm going to be interested to read it because I always thought the language of our bylaws of suspension was weird. Like, Frank doesn't think I've been removed. That's Frank's argument, you realize, in part of his dissent, is that I've been suspended but not yet removed. It's really weird. To me, I have to read it before I have an opinion on it. But if he argues persuasively on that, that's going to throw a whole monkey wrench into them filling a vacancy, because he argues that a vacancy does not exist, that our bylaws don't provide for removal, and that they have to go through a trial for removal. He has a very interesting argument. I'm putting interesting in quotes because I'm not sure I buy it, even though it would benefit me. I'm not so sure I buy it, but I want to read his full argument. And as somebody who was one of the original architects of the bylaws, they chose the word suspension for a reason. They could have used the word removal, and they didn't. I don't know. I'm reserving judgment. On it. But I find it funny how hysterical the rest of the JC's getting over wanting to give him the Judicial Committee tapes. Here's my opinion about the Judicial Committee recording. I bet you it's a nothing burger. I bet you nothing was said in there that is shocking, surprising, scandalous, or anything. That they're just being stubborn and don't want to release it. But you want to know what happens when you tell libertarians they're not allowed to see something? They will move heaven and earth to see it. I think it's going to be a nothing burger when it comes out. And that they should just release it. Because nobody will care. It's like that Johnson contract. Remember the eternal secrecy clause in the Johnson contract that Nick Sarwark and Oliver Hall were fighting so hard to keep secret. All everyone wanted to do was see it. And then when we finally got to see it, it was so stupid. It was a utter nothing burger that no one would have cared of until you told libertarians they weren't allowed to see it. No one would care about this JC recording. The only reason people care is because they've been told they're not allowed to care. They're not allowed to hear it. So you want to know what's going to happen at convention? I'm going to make the motion because now I'm peeved that I can't hear it. It concerns me. I'll probably be the one making the motion at convention to ask the convention to order the JC to release the frickin' tape. And I bet you when we hear it, we're going to be like, why were you hiding this? It's stupid. I don't know why people get like that. I just don't. Anyway, that's it for this evening. Maybe I will do some more recording. I'm just going to make one promo at the end here. I am only $10 away from meeting my November goal. So if you would consider becoming a patron of the show, it would be greatly appreciated. Again, I know money is tight. Not everyone can do it. This is not a guilt trip. It's sheerly a free will gift. If you can do it, I would appreciate it. It's at patreon.com/Pink Flame of Liberty. Or as some others have done, some people have upped their subscriptions. I've had some $5 a month subscribers that have turned into $10 a month subscribers. But, again, no guilt trip, none of that. It's just if you can help me make that extra $10 to the goal, I would be very appreciative. Will everyone have an awesome night? And hopefully I will talk to you some this weekend. Maybe I will live stream a bit from the South Carolina convention. Have a good night, everyone. Love you.
gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians, or choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a business.